All right, we go ahead and start, Michael.
Sweet. So I forget what the title of this is.
Something
'Cause-
something offensive security PG.
Well, I meant for because we have the Python part too.
Yeah. Cybersecurity
So
programming in Python Part 1. Thanks,
yeah,
Javante.
thank you. So what in the world is offensive security? A look into the world of offensive security. First thing we have to say is do not attempt anything in this presentation if you do not have explicit written permission or recorded permission, like later in the presentations. If you're interested in practicing any of these, the things we're going to go over, hackthebox.com and tryhackme are the two best places to actually practice doing things and learning. Who are we? I'm Michael. I'm an offensive security consultant here at Echelon Cyber and Risk. That's some of my credentials, the ECPTX, the ECCPT, and the Net Plus certification from CompTIA.
Yep, and I'm Evan. I'm a senior offensive security consultant. Michael put pure skill. Just I don't chase certs very much, but I still plan on getting a few at some point. So that's why they're not on there.
How did we get into cybersecurity? I started off doing stuff at Nextech of all places, and thought I wanted to be a software developer. And we were doing our capstone projects and everything. And I decided to give cybersecurity a try because it piqued my interest. And I started off doing a phishing page and phishing all of the other Nextech things. Sorry, the Nextech catapults, and I wasn't allowed to capture passwords, but I captured all the clicks and had a 100% success rate. That kind of piqued my interest, and off of there, I got an internship off at Rook Cybersecurity, and that just kind of snowballed into me only doing cybersecurity because I learned that I hated software development. Evan?
Kind of the opposite of the spectrum. My bachelor's degree had almost nothing to do with cybersecurity. I started out as a kid, basically wanted to work with as a hacker. I saw all the movies and I wanted to be a hacker. And I used to pull my dad's laptops apart and always tinkered with things and set up my own servers. And I was mostly learning in like C and like some other basic languages. Kind of fell off the map for me when I went to my college degree, and then I came back to it around my master's. I wanted to get a master's in cybersecurity. So when I finished that, I went into actually digital forensics, which for anybody who doesn't know, digital forensics is basically like studying memory and storage of like a computer, and trying to determine like if something bad happened to that computer at any point, or being able to look up somebody's history just using files on the system that already exists. And then from there, transitioned back into red teaming afterwards, and got into offensive security. And I was able to translate those school or skills that I had kind of learned over there into offensive security. So, but unlike Michael, I'm that's how they get you, yeah. Unlike Michael, I'm very into programming and scripting. So I actually build a lot of the tools that I use in my own engagements. Sometimes Michael uses them too. And
I use Evan's tools because they're good and free.
but I am a big fan of reinventing the wheel, and so we'll get more into it later. But I think that's a huge perk in cyber. So
A lot of the questions we get are, do you need to go to college? Me personally, I only did college classes in high school. I never did anything other than that because I thought college was kind of boring. I didn't like the idea of doing it. Evan here has a master's degree. So if you want to talk about your college stuff a little bit more and how that helped you.
yeah, I think what really helped me is I did a lot of research before I got my master's. My big interest was I didn't want to just go somewhere that kind of brushed over things and just told me to use tools that already existed. I wanted to understand why tools worked and how computers worked from a lower level, being able to marshal information over a network. And so I have basically a partially networking degree and a partially like host-based security degree. I don't think that's necessary for everybody. I think it's really helpful for people who are just really intrigued and really want to sponge up information. It was Windows and Linux based systems. It was irrelevant. So at pretty much any point I could, if I needed to get on a computer and I didn't want to install another tool, I could make another tool with whatever's on that system and use it. That was kind of the goal I wanted. They call it living off the land. And so I really wanted to be able to just tap into what already exists on this computer and how can I use it to do malicious things, right? So
Yeah, for college, it helps with showing a lot of the fundamentals of understanding. If you don't want to go the college route and you want to save some money, certifications are definitely a strong option. That's all I did. I went from basic pen testing certifications, entry level, junior stuff, and all the way up to the ECPTX, which is a higher level red teaming certification. Another thing you're going to need is passion for it because everything changes daily. There's a joke that goes around that DEF CON and all the other security conventions, whenever people release books, it's the books are out of date by the time they release because of how fast everything changes. Evan, you can kind of attest to that because you're the guy who buys all the books at DEF CON.
yeah, and I think that's true. It depends on what you're doing specifically, but especially in the world of like networking, and pretty much any book that comes out for Cisco is irrelevant within 6 months. That's just pretty much the truth all around. I do see some questions in the chat though, as far as the types of applications we use and what kind of systems we use. I use any system right now. I'm on a Mac system. I don't really like Mac, but it's important to understand Z Shell and all those other things. I think it's really important to be ambidextrous as far as your operating systems, or I guess that's the best word to use for it, and just be able to use all of them. If you really want to learn, use the command line for everything. Don't use the GUI, open up the PowerShell console or anything. Yeah, Michael's saying no. Well, that's what I think. What kind of makes us different, right? There's different types of people in this field, and I think people don't realize that. But yeah, so my favorite operating system is definitely Linux. I tend to use Parrot OS. I actually have my Parrot OS hoodie upstairs. It's my favorite distro of Linux. Yeah. So, what certifications do you think are best, Michael, for cybersecurity?
For cybersecurity, I think it depends on what you're trying to do. A lot of it, I think you can go with the CompTIA route if you just want to show understanding. Net Plus, Security Plus are definitely like base foundations for any kind of entry level job. From there, you can kind of just decide what you think is best for you and find certifications that kind of line up with it. Make sure they're from like a reputable organization and not just some cert mill.
Yeah, I think my biggest stress with certs is they're not accurate. If you get OSCP, which tends to be like the baseline for most people that are hiring for pen testers, it's really not accurate. It's not something that you get thrown into there and you immediately can be thrown into a client environment and understand what's going on. But I do think they're important for somebody who doesn't actually have any other experience. If you don't have any experience, certifications are kind of a requirement, or you have to really be able to explain your depth of knowledge. So why Next Tech and why did I start at Next Tech? This is my first year at Next Tech. I've been tutoring and training in Python and Golang and 12 other languages as far as pen testing goes, and for a long time. So this is just for me, it's a natural transition. It's another thing I can do to kind of give back. I didn't grow up in a very well-off neighborhood, so I always thought I wouldn't be able to get into pen testing because of my upbringing. So I'm glad that I was able to do it in any way, kind of give that back. I'm happy to do that. So
Networking with people, not systems. A lot of this job is who you know. It helps a lot. Pen testing and offensive security is probably the hardest thing to get into when it comes to any IT related work. I know people who have certs and have been trying to get a role doing red teaming stuff for years, and just because they don't go to the events or anything like that, it's extremely hard for them to kind of break in and actually get involved.
yeah, I'd say that's true. I think the other thing is you can pivot from something else, which is what I
That's
did.
true.
So, and then where would you start, Michael, if you didn't have any experience or base level knowledge?
I would start on Try Hack Me or Hack the Box. Get probably up to like, well, I this is kind of what I did. I got to the hacker rank on Hack the Box, and then a buddy of mine was a manager at a pen testing firm here in Indy, and I said, hire me, and he said, get this other certification, and I will, and it just kind of worked out.
I'm not sure about I understand the question about research opportunities. I do a ton of research like on the side for like fishing and stuff like that, if that's what you're asking. Opportunities to like find new ways to, I guess, invent new attack paths. That's definitely more of a niche thing. Not everybody does that. So
Here, we got to
uh,
get through these.
yeah, go for it.
Subjects to know: networking principles, understanding how networks work, and what a domain controller is, basically. You can get a lot more into depths about networking. I'm not going to do that right now because it could literally take the entire day.
Yeah.
Uh, Web app principles, get requests, post requests. That's all networking too, just through a different layer. Lots of different software and tools. We use hundreds of tools all the time. It's kind of annoying to keep up with all of them, to be honest. A couple of the main ones. Evan hates the first one. Metasploit, goaded. I don't care what he says. Burp Suite, Wireshark are also some other ones that we use a lot. Evan, do you have any other tools that you think that should be up there?
Anything written in Go. If it has the word Go in front of it, it's probably good.
That's fair. Communication skills in writing. Communication helps a lot with just getting your team functioning and just keeping everything on pace to dealing with clients. Not all clients are always happy with things. Some of them get very upset because they had this false idea that they were unbreachable, and then Evan and I come in, and 8 hours later, we're domain admins on their network.
Yeah, exactly.
Writing, as much as I hate writing, it is probably the most important part of our job. Evan, do you have any other comments on that?
Yeah, I think one thing that nobody thinks about when they get into pen testing is you have to be able to explain it to a client, and then you have to be able to explain it to their boss, and that's where writing comes in. So you're writing that report for both the people that can understand what you did at a technical level, and then the people who can't. And so that's writing is extremely important. If you can't explain what you did, then there's really no use case for it. So
What's your normal week look like, Evan? That's what mine looks like. That's on the slide.
mostly dodging calls from you, but most
True.
of the week. So I would say my normal week depends on the type of engagement I'm on. If it's a really large engagement, the whole week could be pen testing, and then there will be a whole week of just report writing. Because I'm more of a senior on the team, a lot of my week also is kind of giving like hints and tips or like helping other people with their engagements. Again, I do research for the team as well, so trying to find time to fit all of that in.
Yeah. Some of the engagements can go on for months at a time. We have a big red team client right now, and their network test, I think, was a month long. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we have two of them that are a month long right now.
Yeah. So they can be as short as a couple of days all the way up to months.
Yep. And if it's a web app, it could be one day too. So it really depends.
Yeah,
Like sometimes you might have like a web app right in the middle of your test because you've got three other tests going on, but at least you have one day you can, set aside to do this. So
true. What cool stuff have we done? Story time from me. I pride myself on being a bank robber. I don't like banks. I think they're bad. Uh, a lot of it is I do a lot of our physical security. This is from a lot of different engagements that are censored. The first picture there is me behind the teller line on their computer installing a remote shell. And with that, all I did was walk in and say, "Hey, I'm here to fix your guys' printer." And they completely believed me for some reason. I'm wearing a hoodie and boots. I'm not there to fix a printer. Uh, I don't know why they let me in. I guess I'm just too charismatic. Uh, that was a good time. The next picture is the same client actually, but I walked into their building and just went a random direction into a hallway and tried a door, and boom, unlocked the door. It's their storage room, and I don't know if you can see that. It says storage on it, but that is a box of credit applications, and you can get a lot more money out of a credit application than you will the $8,000 in cash at a bank. I will say, since everybody's saying admitting the crime, uh, they paid me to do this. I had full legal, paperwork and everything. And then this next one, this is a locked door. I don't just walk in and kind of just tell everybody things. Sometimes I go and try to not get talked to. This is a locked door, but it's hung incorrectly. And this is a little tool that I use to pop the door open. If I can get it to play.
Mhm.
There's a
It might
pop
make you
button.
leave presentation mode to do that.
Yeah, it might. Oh well. Hold on.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, that's my bad. One second. I can rob a bank, but I don't know how slideshows work.
I do not play Fortnite. While he's doing that, let's see. Oh, we can do those. All right, good, Michael.
Can you see this now?
Yep.
I don't know why it's not sliding.
Can you break our slideshow? There you go.
So that door is hung incorrectly, which allows it to be bypassed without a key. Uh, Physical security is something that is extremely overlooked most of the time. Most people think, oh, our networks are safe, so we're totally safe. But there are instances where APTs and criminal organizations have physically breached locations and installed malware and stolen things. So it's something that's overlooked a lot. Evan, it's your turn.
And yes, Carson, we're both pen testers. Yeah, so well, mine was going to be about something that's kind of applicable to today. So this is an actual takeover that we did of an application. So one of the first things we look for in a web application is a SQL injection. So anytime there's a database attached to it, right? Think of your banking website. Whenever you use your username and password, that's going somewhere in the back end that's saying, hey, do you see something that looks like this username with this password? So we basically used that. And we were able to find a point where I could actually send it yes or no questions, right? Like, is the first letter of the answer A? Is the first letter of the answer B? And just keep going through that sequence until I got nothing back. And that's why you see in the top there, or in that picture there, there's a lot of letters, and there might be like a drop, right? So in that drop, it was trying to guess and figure out what letters exist in that location. And if you could actually zoom in, you can actually see the database name being spelled out, as well as the version and a bunch of other things. So with this tool that I built, I was able to enumerate tables. I was able to find users and password hashes as well, which is applicable for the next slide here. So with those users, I could go ahead and I could see if I could find a way to find passwords for those users, and using the application again, trying to find ways of determining with the results I'm getting back whenever I make a bad password guess or a good one, like what looks different, why is it different? I would say a lot of pen testing is figuring out like, well, what is the developer thinking and how can I use that to my advantage, right? So in here we had the SQLi, but we were also able to determine while doing the same testing that I could figure out if a user was valid in another way. So the way I was able to do that was every time I would put in a valid user that I knew from the database, I would have a character length of the response content, right? Whenever you read a page on the internet, it's just text, right? That the browser is rendering for you. It would always have a length of 13,957. So you would subtract the username from that, right? Because you're adding content to that page. So if you put Evan, right, that's 4 characters, subtract 4 characters, you have 13,957. That would mean that it was a valid connection. And then the 12747 meant it was invalid, right? And that's just kind of irrelevant what the content says at that point, but you can kind of guess that I can use that now to say like, is this a good user? Is this a bad user? So this is just part of the script that I used, and you can see at the top there the results of that script determining are these good or bad usernames. And then the last part here is the password brute force. So once I had those users, regardless of how I got them, I could figure out is their password good or bad by just basically running a spray. So we talked about Burp Suite earlier. This was just more of a visual application. Again, trying to explain it to a client instead of just doing everything in code. I can show them that like, hey, when I have a good user, I get a 200 or I get a 302. When I have a bad user, I get a 200 back. And I was able to use that to actually take over the entire application. So if you go to the next slide, in whole, I built a script that started with nothing, would go by itself, get usernames, and then it would enumerate all the passwords of those usernames using all the techniques we just discussed. And then it would basically get every user on the platform's information, and then I'd have everything without even doing anything. I would just kind of walk away from it and let it do its job. So once I finished that, then I had to write the report, which is the worst part. But yeah, that's what that's about. So yep, now we have a question slide, so I'll kind of go back to the Q&A part here. But if you have any other questions for us, please feel free to put them in the chat here, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. Michael, do you want to start?
How old are you guys? I am 23.
I
Evans, how old
am
are you?
32, but I've been doing this kind of stuff since I was like 26 or 27 professionally. So
Like
next
19
question.
for me.
Yeah. Are we contractors or employed? We're both employed. Let's see. I don't really know if I have a best start for game development. That's an entirely different language. I'd highly recommend looking into like Lua or something along those lines. For me, you're always going to learn some programming language because I think it's extremely valuable. So, Michael, what's the first programming language you learned?
Basic.
There you go. Mine was Java, actually. Our clients are always aware that we're testing. The only issue there, or the difference, I guess, would be if it's supposed to be kind of hidden from their security team. You'll notice that a lot of companies will react differently, especially security teams when they know it's coming. They might hide some things, they might block your access to some things. So you might only have one person in the entire company that knows you're there, but somebody will always know you're there. Does it ever feel repetitive? Michael, does your work ever feel repetitive?
Sometimes. It depends on the client. I have to do what is called vishing, which is calling people and pretending to be somebody else on the phone to get higher access without actually having any technical skills. An example, I called a guy and convinced him that I was another employee, and he gave me the local admin password to his computer. So if I went and stole his computer, I would have a login.
Yeah. I would say it doesn't get boring. I think if you let it get boring, it can be. There is such a thing as burnout. Uh, Regardless, every engagement is different. So even if you find the same finding, you could try to find new ways to get more information, or you could try to do something like automated, make it interesting for you. At the end of the day, scanning is always scanning. So if you find that boring and then that's gonna, deter you from wanting to do any more, then this might not be the career for you. But that doesn't mean cyber is not. So,
True.
um, is it as easy as to say in the movies? Absolutely not. And if you hear the word mainframe, that's wrong. That hasn't been done since
The
like the
only
30s.
time it's as easy as it is in the movies is whenever the NSA got hacked and Eternal Blue was leaked, and then it was point and click for like 3 days, and it was awesome. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
that's no longer.
Well, and that still exists actually in the wild quite a
It
bit.
does, but it does not externally facing anymore. Not so much.
What's wrong with writing the report? It's not that something's wrong with it. It's just if you think about it, you've done 3 weeks
So
of work with this
boring.
client, especially if you've had a really successful engagement. Like Michael and I just got off of one where we had 4 or 5 different ways where we could have gotten domain admin, and we did. And so now you have to kind of go back and retrace all of your steps and put it in writing. So it just takes a long time, and you want to do it right, and it has to make sense. You have to go back and find all of your pictures. You have to
We also
find the
stopped
best way to
taking
do it.
notes like halfway through.
Yeah, yeah, that happens quite a bit, especially if you get like really going. But would I pick cybersecurity over software development? I do both. I try to make sure I can do both. I actually have my own company that I use for developing software for cybersecurity. Funny enough, but I don't like to have to pick between one or the other. I don't think you ever should have to pick. So that's totally up to you.
I pay Evan to make tools.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, one time. Um, did we go to college? And if so, what my college experience is different from Michael's. My bachelor's had nothing to do with cybersecurity, and my master's was all about cybersecurity. But yeah.
What's the college you recommended me going to? The
Oh
Dakota
yeah,
one?
there's yeah, South Dakota State University is exceptionally good for actually like cybersecurity and pen testing. And then I went to DePaul, which was really good for like application and like low level understanding of computers and cybersecurity space. So how does Hack the Box works? So there's a bunch of different ones. Hack the Box, there's Try Hack Me. There's another one. It's like Pen Tester Labs or something like that.
Oh,
What
Pentester Academy.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But
They're
what
shut
they
down
are
now.
is basically you make an account and you get access to all these different like machines, and so you'll tell them, "Hey, I want to try this one." They'll start it up, and then you just start pen testing. I would say it's not good to start there. If you want to start somewhere with those, maybe start with like Academy of Hack the Box. That'll help you kind of understand what you can do to like make like a routine, I guess, like a way that you want to start every engagement. So software development. Um, any tips? I honestly I taught myself a lot of my languages. I learned Go in 2 weeks. I think if you can teach yourself how to do a programming language, you can. I mean, you could learn any programming language. You need one like low level, one high level, and then one just like interpreter language. Um, that's my opinion. But really, just kind of start with like an easier language. I wouldn't start with like C or anything like that. If you do want to do that, there's plenty of videos on YouTube that can teach you like pointers and things. But just
How much
give yourself a break and go with like
how much
easier ones
spare
first.
time do you have, Evan?
What's that?
How much spare time do you have to live life?
Uh, if you ask me, I have so much spare time. If you ask my fiance, I have no spare time. Um, so
Real.
I think that's pretty true. I like to stay busy. I really like what I do. So
I
we
would
do
agree with
well.
Evan.
Yeah. Is Hackabox
Hack
free? I
Hack
don't
the
think
Box has a free version, and then they have several different paid options. If you really want to like get the most out of it, the Hack the Box Academy is where I would start, and I believe that one's like $20 a month. I want to say.
Yeah, if you want to go to the next level, I always recommend to, especially people who can program or really want to learn why vulnerabilities exist. If you get done with a hack the box, try to remake it. Go grab a free Ubuntu like license server, whatever it is, and just spin it up, and then try to remake the problem yourself, and then you can get a better understanding. If you can explain to developers in great detail what they did wrong, I think it goes a long way.
That's actually one of the things we ended up doing to test potential new hires. Is we spun up our own machines that have vulnerabilities, and we have them try to hack into everything and write a report.
Hmm. Yep, that's very useful. Is software or cybersecurity more complex? I don't think either is more complex. I think they both pull on different parts of your knowledge. So cybersecurity, I think, is more cumulative. There's different layers that you're touching on all the time, and then you have to keep in mind like the legality of things, and like what you can and can't do, and also like where the client may not have told you to stop, but you know you should probably stop right if they have like a third party appliance. Maybe they use 40net for like routers or something. They don't own those things, so you can't test those things. So I think there's just a lot more out of the box thinking that goes into cyber, and I think there's a lot of in depth thinking that goes into software engineering. So block-based coding for starters. Scratch or block-based? I'm not familiar with Scratch. I can't give you a recommendation on that one, unfortunately.
Scratch is good if you want to understand the fundamentals of how coding works and uh, things like else if statements. Basically, it's a way to visualize coding without actually typing everything out.
Oh,
I
pseudocode.
remember. Say it again.
Pseudocode.
Uh, Not sure. Scratch is literally like a drag and drop coding. So it's like this is the statement, and then you put it in order, and it does the functions. It's good if you don't understand how things are working and you want to understand how code is working.
Gotcha. Okay. Understandable. I think Google is your friend. If there's a lot of terms you don't understand, you can definitely Google it. If it seems like it's bringing up answers that aren't relevant to cybersecurity, you can just always append like computers or cybersecurity into the end of it. But typically, if you have a question about something that exists, you can find it on Google.
Google has given us the passwords to many of things too.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole field out there for what they call dorking, which is basically just like typing into Google quite a bit and then trying to find information about companies. So yeah, so we'll both be running part two. Part two is going to be probably a lot less Q and A and more so just an example of how you can use programming. That's one of my passions is kind of explaining. When I got into the field, nobody really told me how I could put the two together. My passion for programming and the passion for pen testing. So that's kind of where this comes from. So average income for cybersecurity. It depends on where you go. I've worked in a Fortune 500 company before, and I mean, the income there is way higher because they work you to death. So it's more about like how much do you value your time and how much do you really like to do the work? Because if you go work at like a top four company, right, you're not going to have any free time, and especially if you're a good employee, you're just going to be worked to the bone, basically. You'll be paid well for it, but so I kind of learned from that experience, like I value learning more than I do just doing things. I wasn't learning enough from my engagements because I never had time between them. So, um, are there many white hat hackers in the system? Technically, Michael and I are both white hat hackers. I think there's a lot more white hat hackers than there are black hat hackers. So,
that you know of, anyway.
well, you should know more white hats than black hats. We ever had a client refuse us to test their security? And how would we handle it all the time? It's really just kind of explaining you're on the same team. There's a mentality when you get into testing that the DevSec teams tend to have, and it's always you're just here to like rid me of my job, and that's just not true. We're just testing infrastructure. We're just testing things. We're trying to make their job better, right? Because if something goes wrong, and we told them about it, then it would be on their fault, right? Then it's on them. But if we told them to fix it and then, somebody tries to attack them the same way we did and then they don't get in, right? Like that's not a win for us, that's a win for them. And so explaining that to them is usually the hardest part.
What
Which one
age
is
are you going to
better?
retire?
I don't know, man. I have this like fever dream down the line of like owning a coffee shop, but even then, as long as I can type, I'll probably still be doing pen testing in some form. So,
I'm going 35.
gosh. All right. Well, when you're retired, you can come visit me.
I will.
Uh,
Do you get in trouble / fined if you leak any info? I think we get sued.
yeah, I'm pretty sure it's worse
How
than
that
that.
works. Yeah.
Yeah, don't do that. No. Which one is better, Windows or Mac OS? That's a very subjective question. I
Windows.
Linux, not Mac and not Windows. I prefer Linux for most things. If you like to play games, don't even bother. Just go to Windows. In your opinion, what language is completely under or
Go
overrated?
is overrated.
Go is not overrated. Uh, Overrated. I would say Python is extremely overrated. I think Python is bloated quite a bit. Um, I think it's okay to
COBOL.
learn on Python, but it's COBOL. Yeah, get out of here.
COBOL is underrated because all banks still use COBOL. And if you can be a very good COBOL dev, you will make a lot of money
I
because there's
think
only
that
like 4 people who know
yeah,
COBOL.
exactly. That's what I think there's only like four people who know COBOL. Mike, what would you say is the difficulty difference between offensive and defensive security?
Um, there's a quote that I like a lot that is, I have to be right one time. You have to be right every time.
Who told you that quote?
I think that was the IRA to Margaret Thatcher, but that is not
I
not
love that quote.
correlated.
That's pretty much
It's
how I
it,
see
it
it.
fits it fits our role extremely well
Yeah.
because we will find the most obscure ways of getting in. Um, an example: Evan was looking through a notes file that was just on a client. Oh no, it's the description of an account, and
Okay.
Evan found the domain administrator password
Yeah.
in the notes of the file.
Yeah. It was an RPC. It was just kind of like a phone book for your environment, and they put their own password in their information field. How much is actually programming as opposed to just searching for files? Depends on how much you want to program. I can make anything programming if I want to. I think there's a lot of risk involved with just programming everything, but I mean, you can do as much of it as you want. Do we work for someone else or ourselves? We both work for Echelon. And then I mean, I have my own company. Michael has his own company, but he does something different with his own company.
Yeah, we're
So
not gonna get in mine.
no.
Have there ever been a system that took you over 10 hours to get into, or is that something that usually time? We've had some stuff that took a long time,
Hmm. We had
especially with
recently the pivots
yeah.
that we do. Yeah.
Well, the pivots, and we also had one where we were trying to find ways to abuse the misconfigurations that they had in their roles with trying
Yeah.
to give our account permissions through compromised accounts, and that
We had
took like all
the
day.
locked out account was a fun one too, where it was like, so we had like the password for this guy. We knew it was a valid password, and it wasn't locked out; it was expired. And so we had to try to find a way to unexpire and change his password. And eventually, we did, but that took us a lot longer than we had thought it would take. So
Looking back on it, the thing that was right, which should have been like the first thing we tried to do, all we had to do is remote into his computer and hit change password.
any computer, yeah, any computer.
So
But
it's stuff like that where it's you get in the rabbit holes of there's no way it can be this simple.
yeah, yeah,
It has to be
that's true.
complicated, or else we just won't be happy about how it happened.
Right. I agree with that. Yeah, it's definitely a lot of rabbit holes. And I think the one of the worst parts about it is like nobody's going to be able to tell you if you're in a rabbit hole, if you're on the right path. So if you're not willing to kind of work through it and find a dead end every once in a while, this also might not be the career for you. So I think that kind of goes back to DevSec versus offense. I think DevSec is a lot more curated, right? Like you can kind of pick and choose tools and you can kind of map them to work a certain way and tune them. Offense is more like I think there's a lot of guessing involved. Like it's educated guessing, but there's a lot of guessing. And you really are just kind of like throwing paint at the wall to see what sticks in a lot of cases. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. You can do it quieter, you can do it louder, but I think that's the main difference. Any other questions?
Scrolling through.
Yeah,
Do you freelance pen testing or do you exclusively work through a company?
technically a little bit of both. I've done both, especially for like wireless. I like to do wireless testing. There's just not a lot of that in our company. So my company, I'll go out and I'll do that every once in a while for like
Uh,
local companies.
my, the place I worked for before Echelon would contract us out whenever we were fully booked as an optional thing, where if you could balance like 3 pen tests at a time, you could make like 5 grand a paycheck, and it was awesome.
Yeah, and there are
But
things like bug bounties too you can do. Which if nobody's heard of that, it's a lot of companies like Google, like really big companies will say, hey, if you can hack me and like show me how you did it, we'll give you money for it. So that's technically like a consulting gig on the side.
yeah, and some of the bug bounties, if you can get really good at them, some of them are like high value targets. So if you can remotely take over an iPhone, Apple will give you like $10 million just so you don't sell it to a country.
Right.
I'm scrolling down through here to see what's the best thing to do in high school to do this. Did we answer that one?
I think we kind of maybe not directly, but indirectly answered that one.
Hack the box. The best way if you want to learn networking, um, go to your library and find an old CompTIA networking book. Some of the information will be outdated, but how networking actually works and all of the OSI model stuff will always be the same.
Yeah, I think just getting a deep understanding of the network layer is extremely important. There's like a bunch of network for dummy books out there. Um, Michael can attest to it too. Like a lot of people on our team end up getting stuck on things that would make a lot more sense if they just understand how things work and the environment that doesn't change. So,
Hello.
hello.
What a great session. I want to just thank you guys so much for spending time. If any of you who are listening and out there, join us for session 2. We've put the link in the chat. And thanks again for just a great session, you guys.
No
No
problem.
worries.
All right. We'll see you at the next